Hey guys, so story time. Last night I was just putting away some dishes that had dried, and if you guys are familiar with CUTCO knives, they're very sharp. They're great knives, I love them, but maybe I was getting too comfortable and not handling them as well as I should. I went to go put one of the knives away and dropped it, and I don't remember whether I tried to catch it or if my hand just got in the way, but this is kind of gross. But anyway, it hit my hand, and it didn't hurt a whole lot at first, or even at all. It wouldn't hurt till I washed it. But I immediately, Mark was back like watching TV, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna rinse it off. Maybe it's not too bad. And it actually was. So I was holding it under the sink, and that stung like crazy. But I knew the important thing was to get it rinsed out. Luckily, it was a clean knife, but I was getting it rinsed out, held it under the stream of water for just a couple of minutes, and then I could see it under the water, like just pulsing out blood. It was bleeding really bad. And I also had like tingling all the way down my finger, kind of like when you get like when you bump your elbow and it just like feels numb, right? It felt like that. So I definitely had a nerve. It probably went all the way down to the bone. It was bleeding really, really bad. So rinsed it out, grabbed a clean, dry towel and just put pressure on it, and then walked with my hand above my head back to find my husband. Anybody watching this who doesn't know, my husband's a doctor. So I was like, okay, let's just figure out what I need to do here. So I walked in and I'm like, hey, got a problem. So he walked out with me and took a look at it, and he had me hold it under the water again, and I was literally like clenching my other hand and biting my lip just because holding it under the water is what hurt. Other than that, it didn't really hurt. And again, he's like, okay, well, it's bleeding really bad. Let's see if we can get the bleeding stopped, and then we'll see about whether we need stitches or if we can just glue it back together. And so he put some gauze on there. He pulled out his big medical bag. He keeps a big medical bag on hand, and he has stuff for stopping bleeding, but he's like, this is overkill. Like, this is like, if you cut your femoral artery, like we don't need that. So I'm like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? So he put some gauze on there, and he wrapped it with tape, and he had my hand like crunched because he was trying to get the edges to stay together. That kind of got like it hurt after a while. So I kept my hand taped like that. I'm like, I have so much to do tonight. Now I have to just sit here and wait for my hand. More than anything, I was just annoyed that I had done this. But after an hour, he came back to check it, and he had me open my hand up, he unwrapped it, and it was just like cramped, just because, you know, think about having your hand like wrapped really, really tight. It just hurt from being tight. So it was nice to have it open, but it was still bleeding like exactly the same as it had been an hour before. It just wasn't stopping. So the funny thing was that, you know, when you're in the moment, you forget about some of the tools that you have at your disposal, right? You're just kind of like, and this has happened to me before. When I get sick, sometimes I forget about some of the things that I have on hand that will help me as far as my oils and different things. And he was the one who asked me, he's like, don't you have an oil for stopping bleeding? I was like, yeah, helichrysum. Like, you're gonna have to open the bottle for me. So I pulled out my helichrysum, you guys, and I am so glad that I have these on hand for when I need them. I was even hesitant. I'm like, this is bleeding really bad. Is this gonna be enough? And so he recommended putting it on the gauze, like getting a bunch of helichrysum on there and then putting pressure on it with the gauze with the helichrysum. And I was like, I'm just gonna try dropping it on there first. And I did, and it was just bleeding too much. And I was like, okay, that's not gonna work. So I did what he said, listen to the doctor, put it on the gauze and put it on there. And I just sat there watching a show for like 5 minutes, and he came back and he's like, okay, so how does it look? I'm like, it's only been like 5 minutes. I don't know, we'll see. So I pulled the gauze off, or he pulled the gauze off and took a look, and you guys, it had stopped 100%, like stopped completely. And it just amazes me every time. I don't know why, because it happens over and over again, but I was super grateful. Now, if you pushed on it, yeah, you could get it to start bleeding again, but there was nothing else we were doing after over an hour that was even slowing it down. So it actually worked. So it actually looks a ton better today. It was like super, you know, puffed and blue. So it was bruised, and it just was maybe 4 times more raised than it is this morning. But after the bleeding stopped and he could get it to stop like that, then he was able to go ahead and use the glue on it. He has a special glue for just keeping the edges together, which is why it's kind of shiny right now. But, you know, that was great. And I could go about the rest of my night and do the things I needed to do. And I'm just really grateful to have tools like my oils that I can use. Obviously, if it had been, you know, more emergent, we would have just gone and gotten stitches, or he would have stitched me up. He's like, I would have stitched you up, but I didn't have any lidocaine on hand. And so we're just going to do this. It's on your hand. Probably not going to show the scar. Probably won't be that big of a deal. So we're just going to go with it. But grateful. So helichrysum. And my friend this morning reminded me that I had shared that with her years ago, and her son dealt with bloody noses all the time. And so that's now what they use to stop a bloody nose right away on contact, and it just works like magic every time. So remember helichrysum for any kind of bleeding, unless it's like, you know, use your common sense, but it works really great.